There's just a few.
Dispute about personal beliefs, it seems. Okay, what was going on today? There were some interesting things that made me think of just psychology in general. Although I guess the first one was this. I remember reading something like this before, like last year. I guess this is like an update. It says, Eastern PA man suspected in drone blast sentenced on weapons counts. A man who federal prosecutors said used a drone to drop explosives near his girlfriend's home in eastern Pennsylvania has been sentenced to 5 years in prison on weapons charges. Jason Mazzucata was arrested on June 2019 after authorities raided his Washington Township home and his auto shop in Bangor. Get this too, it says they were investigating a series of small explosions that had rattled the area residents for several weeks. The searches turned up numerous guns and ammunition that authorities say Mazzucato wasn't allowed to have because his ex-girlfriend had a protection from abuse order against him. Mazzucato said he had guns in the house because he had been subject to harassment. To my understanding too, he denies that he was the one actually flying the drone. But talk about, I guess, the stereotype and perception, where that's one of the first things people think about. You see a drone flying, even if it's a toy, you think it has bombs and stuff that's gonna drop on you. I guess with things like that, the negative stereotype and perceptions of, I guess, like any type of drone, even a toy one flying in the air, people will be afraid of it automatically. Which got me to think, in reading this other article, it kind of relates to the situation, I guess, in the way people think. This article talks about how in a lot of businesses nowadays still, they require you to have things like your temperature check, you have to wear a mask. For the most part, malls in general haven't been doing that, like certain stores do, but not the whole mall. Whereas this one, it says, this one's being, I guess, the first around the area here. This one says, Nanaimo Mall first on Vancouver Island with mandatory mass temperature checks. There have been other retail outlets, but not actual shopping centers, that have taken a stance as a center, said Wood Group Center spokesperson Amber Crank. Some shoppers are keen on the idea, but other things it's a safety measure with a few holes. For example, some people saying it's interesting because they don't enforce the mask once you're inside, said one shopper, so you can just take them off. It is true, actually. I've seen a ton of people do that, where even like in store, they give them like, let's say, a mask and they just take it off after. Or they wear it like just say around the mouth area so they can breathe through the nose. Like, what's the point? And some of the other points I saw, which makes sense too. I mean, if you're in the mall and they're eating, let's just say, food in the food court, how do you enforce that? Where people are sitting down there eating and they're gonna have to take the mask off, correct? So how do you enforce the mask in that sense? It doesn't make sense for every type of business in a mall, which would be more logical to say, depending on what type of business you have, what kind of distancing, I guess, guidelines there are, that might be way more important than just having a mandatory thing in general like this, which might not necessarily make sense in every situation. And that's what got me to think, because they actually mentioned this in the article, where a lot of times places that don't have mandatory mask rules and stuff like that, people are doing it anyways. And the reason for it isn't necessarily because they think it'll work, like in that situation. Like they said themselves, you should keep away from each other like a certain distance. That's your best form of defense, not, for example, being right up to each other regardless if you wear a mask. But this one talks about, I guess, the psychology aspect of all of this, which was the most fascinating. It says, even though other shopping centers on the island have not implemented mandatory masks, most customers are donning them anyways. It's sort of a symbol of doing something, a symbol of you care about me, said Dr. Bonnie Leadbeater with the Department of Psychology of the University of Victoria. Leadbeater said that's the reason why we see so many people wearing masks in the stores, even though it hasn't been mandated from province or many other province operators. In situations where what you're doing feels like it protects you and the people you care about, you're even more likely to do it, said Leadbeater. So it kind of got me to think, where isn't that kind of a more important topic as well? Where if you're guiding and doing things just based because it feels good, when in reality it doesn't help you like in those specific situations, isn't that just as worse to get everyone to believe that, if that makes sense? Like it should be more about practical solutions, like with the mask. People said themselves, like the doctor, just because you wear those masks, like those ones they're giving out and stuff like that, doesn't mean 50 people can gather together, start laughing like crazy and so forth. I mean, they even said the best protection is to actually spread out. I think critical thinking is actually really important during times like this too, isn't it? Like not being guided 100% based on like fear or just, again, because it makes you feel good. It reminds me of so many, I guess, psychology videos and stuff I've seen before. Like there's this one of these ones, it's called Brain Games. This one was peer pressure. It's hilarious. So essentially, like in this video here, what they do is they fooled, I guess, people to go in for a free eye examination. But what the person didn't know, there was this one lady, was when she walked in, everyone else there was an actor. So the experiment went like this. She's sitting down waiting just like everyone else for her appointment. Every once in a while there would be like this beep that appears in the room for some odd reason, so everyone hears it. And she's unaware of what's going on. When this thing beeped, the actors would stand up and then sit back down. Every time, like right on cue. So this lady at first was watching like, what's going on? That was so weird. So as this kept happening, like she's seeing everyone else around her like, okay, they're all standing up, like when it's beeping, I'm the only one that's not doing it. She eventually follows them, so she starts standing up like when it beeps, sitting down. So the other part of this test would be, now that this woman is basically following everyone else like with this beep, even though she doesn't know like what's going on, it's more about the peer pressure, like I'm the only one not doing this. Will she actually continue to do this when they all leave the room? So as they slowly get rid of the other actors, just pretending like, oh, it's your turn in there, she's by herself. Sure enough, when the beep is in the room, she then still stands up and sits down. And to continue the experiment, they basically said, okay, now let's bring in more people who have no clue what's going on and see if they will actually follow this woman. And that's actually what happened. So when it beeped, she stood up again and sat down, and the new people that would come in like, what are you doing? She and him is like, I don't know, that's what everyone else was doing. And sure enough, like a chain reaction, everyone else just starts following her afterwards. Like there, it makes me think of the topic of critical thinking and all that too, where just because everyone else is doing it in that case and it makes you feel good, if it doesn't make sense eventually, imagine like the whole, I guess, generation of people that are doing it just because that's what they were taught, so to speak. And it reminds me before how so many people had all this misinformation where they believed even like outdoors where people can get it so easily, whereas even the doctor said no, like the transmission level outdoors is virtually nothing. But then you had people to the extreme basically attacking others, like even going outside, stay indoors, you'll get it. And basically people were like, yes, policies, restrict everyone, you can't go outside ever. Like there you have to use some critical thinking. That's what I would worry about in this situation, where if it's not based on actual, I guess, tangible facts in those specific scenarios, what's the point of making all this stuff based on fear and misguided information? That would be my worries. And look how long it'll take to actually re-educate people, so to speak, to say, yo, that's not how it works. That makes me think of other topics, like talking about things like the drones and stuff, where a lot of people, they have no clue about how the stuff works, how most people use it. They just have like a feel-good law idea saying, oh, let's just write this because I guess it protects you. In reality, it doesn't. All it does is like restrict people from like using things that are perfectly safe in the way they do it. What is that supposed to be? All right, see you guys later.